So, an employee walks into your office and she says, I've been struggling with anxiety, and my doctor thinks it would help if I could work from home for 2 days a week. And you, being a fair, reasonable business owner, say something like, I appreciate you telling me, but we treat everyone the same here. If I let you work from home, I'd have to let everybody work from home. No. That sounds fair, right? Well, it sounds like the definition of fair. It's we're going to treat everybody the same. Here's the problem. Under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, you likely have just committed a violation. The ADA doesn't ask whether you treat everyone the same. It asks whether you engaged in an individualized, interactive process with a specific employee to try and come up with an accommodation for a disability. And we treat everyone the same is the opposite of individualized. Now, before you panic, I want to tell you something that most people talking about the ADA will never tell you. The ADA is not a blank check. There are many clear, legally recognized situations where you do not have to grant an accommodation. And by the end of this episode, you're going to know exactly where that line is. You'll know when you have to say yes, and just as important, when you're allowed to say no. Mental health accommodations, in particular, are up 125% since 2021 in terms of their number of requests. The average ADA settlement is now over $125,000, and this is coming to your business if it hasn't already. So let's make sure you're ready. Managing HR in-house is overwhelming. That's why we built the People Processes Advisory System. Start with our free HR resource library. Get instant access to policies, guides, and compliance checklists. The templates are just the beginning. Run our strategic HR audit to scan all your key domains for your people processes. In just a few hours, we'll work through and identify your compliance gaps, and my team will generate a custom roadmap for you, meet with you, and show you exactly what to fix step by step, ready to execute. Use our toolkit to generate job profiles, deploy policies, track employee documents. You're not alone. You're backed by a 5-star expert team supporting over 10,000 employees nationwide. Be your team's secret weapon. Visit advisor.peopleprocesses.com to start your free account today. This is going to be part of like a 3-part series, primarily on accommodation. Today is the ADA and mental health. We're also going to talk about pregnancy accommodations in a later episodes under the PWFA. And then we're going to talk about religious accommodations because the Supreme Court changed the rules on that as well just recently. So 3 different laws, 3 different standards, and I want to make sure you don't mix them up. So let's focus in on that ADA stuff first. The ADA requires individualized treatment. Most employment law rewards consistency. Treat everyone the same, apply policies uniformly. The instinct is correct almost everywhere. The ADA is the exception to that. It requires you to treat the disabled employees differently. That's what an accommodation means. You're modifying a rule, a schedule, or a condition for this one person because of their disability. We treat everyone the same fails because it refuses the individualized analysis that the law requires. The legal mechanism for this is what's called the interactive process, a good faith back and forth conversation to explore whether a reasonable accommodation. Failing to engage in the interactive process is itself a de facto violation and failure of the law. Even if the accommodation would have been unreasonable, what they wanted, what they need, can't be honored, can't be done. You will lose the case just by refusing to have the conversation. So, you got to do it, and we're going to talk about that. Now, the ADA applies to employers with 15 plus employees, but there are many states that kind of bring that disability requirement down to 5 or even 1 employee. So, depending on where you're at, it's 15, 5, or 1. Look up your state. So, let's talk about why this is suddenly everywhere and why I wanted to talk about this now. Mental health accommodations in particular are tricky to accommodate. It's not like, I busted my leg. It's much harder to see, and it's a little bit more complicated to understand exactly what they need. Those accommodation requests are up basically 125%, like a little over double in the last 5 years. 56% saw an increase just last year. The EEOC, who enforces this, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, charges have charged 23% more groups in 25 than they did in 24. And in a recent survey, 42% of corporate counsel ranked disability accommodation as one of the top 2 legal risks for 2026. So it's just kind of a big deal right now because courts are enforcing it, the EEOC is enforcing it. It's just coming up a lot. Mental health means that a lot of people are raising this as an issue. The number one most requested accommodation is now remote work. And it's a request for mental health more than any other condition: anxiety, depression, PTSD, ADHD. Whatever they say, those are recognized disabilities. And the most common accommodation they want is now remote work. This is a shift from the old mental model of the ADA: ramps, parking spots, wheelchair accessibility, from that to invisible disabilities. And in 2025, there was a major change. The Second Circuit Court made it a lot easier for employees in 2025. They no longer have to prove the accommodation was necessary to perform the essential job functions, just that they have the disability and the accommodation would help. It's a lower bar, and therefore more requests qualify. The DOJ, Department of Justice, issued guidance in late 2025, expanded and specifically listed remote work as a reasonable accommodation for most businesses. But this matters. The EEOC also reaffirmed in 2025 that in person presence can be an essential function. Pandemic remote work did not permanently redefine every job as remote eligible, and we're going to come back to this. It's one of your primary defenses. So the requests are coming. Let's talk about the process that protects you and then kind of the places where you get to say no if you need to. The interactive process. 5 steps. 1, you receive the request. An accommodation request doesn't need magic word. It doesn't need to say ADA or accommodation. It doesn't need to be in writing. I'm having a hard time with my anxiety and I need to work from home sometimes is a formal accommodation request under the law. First place people trip up is saying, well, they didn't ever really ask for an accommodation. They just told me they were sick and couldn't make it into work. And it's like, okay, all right, okay, but you have to train your managers to recognize this. The clock starts when the employee connects a medical condition to a need for a change. That's it. Medical condition to a request. If that's aligned, this is ADA accommodation. Then to engage in that interactive process. This is the step that most people, small businesses, skip, and it's the number one violation, and it's the thing that costs the most money. You got to have a documented, good faith conversation more than once, normally back and forth. That is, what are your limitations? What functions are affected in your job? And what would help you do it? It's a dialogue, it's not a one time meeting. And you need to document those things. Now, each one of those accommodations that are requested, you need to look over. Remote work, flexible scheduled, modified duties, additional breaks, quiet workspace, reduced stimulation, reassignment. The accommodation doesn't have to be what the employee requested. It just has to be effective. You can pick a cheaper or easier option as long as it actually works. Um, but the key is that we are having this meeting. It's okay, what's the problem in relation to your job? What do you think or your doctor thinks needs to happen in order for you to be able to do so? And then you evaluate those accommodations under a reasonable person standard. We're going to get to those in a second. So, after the interactive process, we explore the accommodations, then we implement them, put the accommodation in place with a trial period, check in at 30, 60, 90 days. Is it working? Does it need adjustment? Document each check in. And step 5 is you got to document each conversation, every option considered, every reason for a decision. If you end up in court, your documentation is your defense. No documentation, no defense. So, that's the yes path. Someone comes to you with a problem, you engage in the interactive process, you explore accommodations, you implement and you monitor and you document it all. Okay? Now, let's talk about when you don't have to accommodate. The ADA is a reasonable accommodation standard, not an unlimited one. Congress built the limits right into the law, and here are the first 3. 1, undue hardship. Significant difficulty or expense is how that's defined. You never have to provide an accommodation that causes undue hardship. The legal standard of significant difficulty or expense, and this is the important part that protects a small business, the law weighs the cost against your size and your resources. A $10,000 accommodation is a rounding error for a 5,000 person company. For a 20-person shop, it can be genuine undue hardship. Same accommodation, different answer. That's not a loophole, it's written into the statute. For small business, the undue hardship ceiling is reached much faster. The law is proportional by design. That undue hardship covers accommodations that are unduly extensive or disruptive as well, not just necessarily expensive. If modifying one employee's schedule would stop other employees from doing their jobs, that disruption can be an undue hardship as well. So that's the most common reason a small business can't comply with this. The potential accommodation would really damage their business. If you're a business that does $110,000 a year in profit, and to accommodate this requires that you spend multiple, solid percentages of your entire annual profit that is an unreasonable undue hardship. Okay. It's just part of it. Now, if you're making 10 billion a year, well, put in some damn ramps, right? Like, pardon. That's just part of life. So you want to make sure you understand that undue hardship provision. The second is, and this is very important, is you never have to eliminate an essential function. Accommodation means helping the employee do the essential function, not deleting them. So you can reassign minor marginal tasks. So if they're, if they, for example, have some job that is particularly physical and they have to do a lot of work out in the field, they have to dig ditches or whatever, but then they have to like log it, they have to take pictures and log it. Okay. Like take a picture at the end. I don't know what disability would mean that you could dig ditches, but you weren't able to take pictures. But let me use that as an example. Just work with me here. You could have them complete the core function of the job, but not the last. I have a great example. Came from a real life client somewhat recently. It is a company. Two guys go out in a big garbage truck. We're going to call it a garbage truck. One guy drives, the other guy has to get out and hook up some stuff and de-hook the stuff. Hooking the stuff up is about 40, 50 pounds. And what they normally do is one person drives and one person does that. And then they switch off, right? Just because it's no fun to lift it. But it's not like lifting the heavy stuff and hooking it to the truck is particularly, like straining. So a guy got in a car wreck, not at work, but just in a really bad car wreck, and it screwed up his back. He could still drive, but the doctor said, look, for like 8 to 12 weeks, I don't need you to lift anything over 20 pounds. So that meant he couldn't do the hook and unhook. Even though this was a smallish business, 25 employees, I think, maybe 30, it was relatively easy for them to accommodate that by saying, okay, you're just going to drive. Your coworker doesn't mind doing the hookups and unhooks every, hour for the shift. No big deal, right? Technically, it made the other person work harder, kind of. But that was the key. Now, we still needed to make sure that he was able to drive. He wasn't taking any crazy drugs, for his back pain and stuff like that. But long and short is that was a reasonable accommodation at that size of company. Just it worked out. Now, if that was a job that required one person to go drive and unhook and rehook, the same person, and driving out there and not being able to hook or unhook meant that there was no reason to drive the car out there. So the only accommodation that would work would be that another person rides around with him, and that wasn't the norm. Then that would have been a big burden. That would basically be, you know, having an extra employee. You just get to not do a core function of your job, which was hooking and unhooking. But because this job, that really wasn't a core function, they could switch it out. It's no big deal. That's a key piece. Okay. So essential function. What is essential to the job versus a marginal task? Attendance and in-person presence can be an essential function. Ford Motor Co. and Samper in the Ninth Circuit. Ford Motor Co. was a Sixth Circuit court. Both held regular attendance was essential. So it's not always that people can just work from home forever. All right. Another example: an opening baker, like who's makes croissants, who has to be there at 4 a.m. to run the oven. If someone can't perform the essential function of running the oven at 4 a.m., then it's not. It's like if that's their job to come in at 4 and do the oven, it'd be very difficult to argue that he could come in at 2 p.m. and turn on the oven, right? Someone else would have to do it. You got to explore other options, but it's very difficult when it's just one person doing a core job that you're trying to accommodate. All right. Limit number 3. You don't have to provide the preferred accommodation. The employee has a right to an effective accommodation, not their favorite one. The EOC is explicit. If 2 accommodations both work, you can choose one that's cheaper or easier to provide. So if an employee asks for a private office for their anxiety, could be a bit excessive. If a quieter office location, a white noise machine, or noise-canceling headphones would effectively solve the concentration problem, that would be something to provide instead of building an office. Giving the employee's preference primary consideration is important. It's like that's always what did you need? Well, look at that. But the final choice among effective options is yours, the employer. So those are 3 key pieces there. Now, I'm going to actually make this into a part 2 because I realize I'm already 14 minutes in and we haven't gotten to the other one. So our next segment is going to be on when you don't have to accommodate, part 2. We're going to look at leave, indefinite or open-ended, paid or unpaid. We're going to look at direct threats, the employee's qualifications, standards and excuse misconduct, and certain documentation requests. We're going to look at those in the next one, and then we're going to talk about how this applies to the small business section. Okay, so I'm going to do that in a second video, just so you guys have a part two. So this is leave accommodation part one. I hope this is helpful to you. Down in the description, we have a link to our advisor site, advisor.peopleprocesses.com. If you use the link, it'll take you to the right page. Otherwise, you get a bunch of stuff. You have to put in your email address. It's free. Okay, I'm not going to bug you. We send 3 emails when you sign up over the course of a month, and then I update you once a month. Okay, I'm not blowing you up, but you can always unsubscribe once you have the login. Anyway, in there, every episode has a take home, and on this one, we have an accommodation interactive process guide where we've deep dived into like just a template, so you can use that to run your interactive process, and some other materials in there to figure out what sort of accommodations are helpful. I hope you find that useful. If you need more, you could absolutely have us do a strategic audit on your organization where we dive in and look at about 185 different things. I'm not joking, it's 185 things, where we organize where some of your biggest red flags are, some of your biggest potential returns are for organizing your labor, and I would love to help you with that. It's normally $1,000 for small businesses. It goes up to many thousands for large businesses. If you're a US-based 10-person organization or more, and you'd like us to do it for you, you totally could have me do it for the first 10 people from this episode. I think our prior episodes are all locked up at this point, but if you want us to look it over, go to that advisor.peopleprocesses.com and use EP75 Audit, EP75 Audit, Echo Papa 75 Audit as the discount code. So you go in, you click Audit, Strategic Audit, and go to the checkout page, type in that EP75 Audit, and I'll do yours for free. Okay, give you a place to start and identify your red flags and great risk and labor return opportunities to move forward. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. Go out there, have a great day, okay?